This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Great. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Public Works public hearing for consideration of water and sewer rates for FY 27, 28, and 29. Make a motion to open the public hearing.
I second the motion.
Thomas Molesbury,
Yes.
Leah Strode,
Yes.
Gil Hogan,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I would like to open this hearing with a final presentation from Rayburn Consulting with findings and recommendations.
Alrighty.
And also, if you want to give any background or anything on the process, or just get into it, whichever.
I think we'll just do for the folks that are here. We specialize in doing rate studies for utilities, not just on the high level, but on a granular level of your actual consumption by tier. So we're known for doing very detailed data analysis. We work with utilities as small as 200 to we're doing the largest meter change out in the history of the United States right now in a very large utility. So we work with a wide variety of utilities. The rate studies that we did for this particular one was very in-depth. Multiple versions were done. I would say you guys dotted your I's and crossed your T's. So you have a bunch of flavors to view. And the data that we received was solid for the years that we have.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, and we perform a data-centric rate structure analysis. We look at it based on your historical usage patterns. So we look at each of your consumer or revenue classes as well, and the contribution or the draw that they have on the infrastructure based on their meter size. And so we used a lot of your consumption history for the last couple of years in order to come up with this information and model it out. The objective is to minimize the rate increases to the greatest extent possible while continuing to appropriately fund water and sewer operations and maintenance. We also take a look at your overall enterprise fund health and making sure that you are able to maintain healthy reserves as well as meeting all of your expenses, and also protecting the utility from the volatility that can happen when you have fluctuations in usage patterns caused by things such as regulations, mandatory conservation, and weather patterns. So we took a review of the fiscal year 23 and 24 data. We did a comparative analysis of surrounding communities and other communities in the state of similar size and function. And we did an impact analysis of the various alternative rate and fee structures so we could illustrate the effects on customers in specific classes and use categories. And then we modeled those projections to meet your budgetary capital expense and debt service requirements over the next 3 years.
One thing to just quickly interject, fiscal year 23 and 24, this model rate year that we did is 25, and then as we continue that data will get more and more accurate to take in the different changes, weather patterns, and we include all that. So this data was this much. As time goes on, it gets more and more accurate.
And the way the models are built is that we typically recommend a mid-year review just to see, are we on track? Do we need to tweak the model in any way? And then we can make minor adjustments as we go along. But this gives you a good starting point. So we modeled out your consumption patterns, and this just kind of gives you an overall view of what your consumption patterns have looked like in the past. And you can see Q3, and these are based on the calendar year. So as you would expect, usually in Q3 during the summer months, you're going to see spikes in usage when people are watering their lawns and filling their pools and things of that nature. But as you can also see over the years, you have had a trending upward growth pattern. And we will look at rates in terms of revenue classes, residential, commercial, and industrial, and then other. And that's how in some communities, that's how we would break out the rate structures. But because you guys have an existing rate structure where your base fee is based on your meter size, what we'll show you here in a few, these revenue classes don't really correlate for the analysis. So we took a different approach on this than we typically would. So this gives you your rate category breakdowns. Your water and sewer in town basically make up the bulk of your usage and your revenue. This gives you a breakdown of what the average quarterly usage and revenue per rate category is.
For clarification, CF is cubic feet, so it's not gallons, just so that it's a clarity
Your
there.
fire services are charged flat fees based on the size of the service line. So those don't fluctuate too much. But this is where your bulk rates are, or how those come out and break out down. And your current rates here as they are existing. And then we looked at neighboring communities of similar size and structure. We see Northampton is significantly higher than your rates. And they've got, notice that the base charges that we have listed here are based on the 5/8 inch meter size. And everything over 1 inch sewer charge is based on the water in 100 cubic feet. Unmetered sewer charge is 80% of whatever the water CCFs are. Webster, their base includes a minimum amount of usage. So 500 cubic feet is included in that base fee, but that is significantly higher than what your rates are. Long Meadow is pretty close to how your charges are, but their base fee is still is a little bit more than what yours is, but their usage, they don't have any kind of a tier structure. So when we just break this down, Long Meadow's rates are closest to Easthampton with the exception that their base charge, and their base charge is about 48% higher than Easthampton's. Both Webster and Northampton's base charges are more than triple of Easthampton's. Webster includes that 500 cubic feet, and the charge for the remaining usage is 70% higher than Easthampton's. And Northampton has a two-tiered rate structure for water only, with the first $1,600 being charged in line with Easthampton's, but they are penalizing their higher consumers quite a bit more. And part of the reason we look at these is not because you have to do what your neighbors do, but your community will compare to other communities around you. And they're going to ask, they're going to ask, how much are you paying for water? And so we want that people to see that even if you do go with the rate increase this year, you're significantly less than your neighbors. Our modeling tool provides revenue projections typically for 5 to 7 years using historical consumption data and the current fiscal year budget. So Easthampton provided a full year consumption for 23 and 24, and we averaged that consumption to create the model year. We did an analysis of the three main revenue classes and showed that modeling based on those classes would unfairly impact the residential customers because they comprise so much of the overall customer base. And that's why we chose to continue with the modeling the way you currently have it set up with the base fee based on your meter sizing. Large meter customers only make up 1.4% of the customer base, but they consume 22% of the overall usage. And those customers pay significantly more in base charges than the small metered customers do. So we made some assumptions during the model. We looked at the capital project plan and assumed that it would stay the same as provided in the documentation that we received over the next 5 years. We added linear 4.5% increases in operational and personnel expenses just to keep pace with typical inflation. We did not factor in a percentage, any growth rate in the customer accounts. So it's possible you'll have more customers come in and move in, but we prefer to take a more conservative approach. That way we give you the worst case scenario up front. Tap fees, backflow fees, and fire line fees, they really make up less than 1% of your overall revenue. So they weren't included in the revenue projections. That just becomes found money at the end of it all. So the first thing we did was we modeled out what it would look like if you did nothing, if you don't do anything. And a couple of things that we look at fixed revenue. So your fixed revenue is what you're getting out of your base charges. And that fixed revenue, typically, according to AWWA advice, is 20%. That gives you a little bit of insulation against volatility in case your usage is down for any reason, either mandated or by voluntary usage.
Emory and AWWA stands for?
American Waterworks Association. In fiscal year 27, if your current usage patterns remain stagnant, the revenue to expense ratio would be 111% and result in a positive net revenue of over $607,000. Now that's going to be reduced over the next 5 years and will result in a negative revenue by over $1.4 million. Fund balance remains at or above the year-end target until fiscal year 30 due to expected increases in capital project costs. And this just kind of illustrates that. As you can see that in the orange, those are your net revenues without changing the rates and keeping your existing rates. So for next year, you'll be okay. The following year, your net revenues will go down, and then in fiscal year 29, it's even less. What we do say is because you are starting with a healthier retained earnings, your retained earnings, you'll be able to remain above your target retained earnings. And we consider retained earnings, target retained earnings, as 25% of your operating expenses. And that's just general accounting principles. You go to a financial advisor and they're going to advise you to have 3 months worth of your income in savings, and that's what this is doing, is that it's putting 3 months worth of your expenses into savings so that should you experience some downfall, you're going to be able to make up those costs.
We would consider 25% a minimum. We're dealing with, and we can name names because it's public information. Natick got hit with PFAS. They had to come up with $50 million for a PFAS plant. That moved things quickly. So having reserves of $2 or $3 million might seem like a lot. In your assets in the ground, people say, oh, we just built a new plant. It was $5 million. Dig up every street in your entire city and replace every single water and sewer line. You are talking an ungodly amounts of money. So $2-3 million is realistically a drop in the bucket. So I just want to quantify, because sometimes it's questioned, well, that $3 million, that seems like a lot. That is not. So but it's healthy and it's a standard, so you guys are maintaining that.
And if you did nothing for the next 5 years, you're going to stay, your fixed revenue, you don't have a lot of insulation against the volatility. And so if your usage patterns go down drastically, that's going to draw against your reserves significantly. So the next model that so for the impacts, if you choose not to raise the rates, you're going to set the stage for needing to raise rates beginning in fiscal year 28 and beyond, just to cover your operational and capital expenses. And you have an increase in planned capital expenses in fiscal year 30 that creates a need to ensure your fund balances are protected and stable from variable revenue in fiscal year 27 through 29. So for this reason, what we focused on was modeling strategies which would allow Easthampton to raise your fixed revenue percentage toward the industry goal of 20%. Ensure that your expenses are met each year for the next 5 years, and spread the impacts of an increase fairly across the customer base. We don't want all of the residential consumers to have to foot the bill, but we also don't want the larger consumers to have to foot the bill. So we tried to look at different models that would give you a more equitable spread. So these will, the models that we did initially, and we're going to actually show you 4 different models in here, but the initial 3 were designed to look at insulating the city from variable revenues. During dry years, enforced conservation mandates imposed reduced usage. During wet years, it's a voluntary decrease in usage, just because if it's raining out, nobody's going to turn on their sprinklers. They don't need to. We also wanted to maintain equitable distribution across all rate categories and revenue classes, and maintain 3 months' worth of operating expenses in reserve. So option 1 was a 5% increase on all base and usage rates. What this is doing is that it's keeping you ahead of the anticipated 4.5% inflation. It's a straight 5% increase year over year on all base charges and volumetric rates. But because you're impacting base charges and volumetric rates the same, your fixed revenue is going to remain at 11% of the total revenue. It does maintain a modest gain in each year except for fiscal year 30, and you do see a decrease in fixed revenue percentage. It doesn't really provide you any insulation. And here's where you can see what that looks like. The purple is your net revenue after changing the rates. It's a modest increase over what you're seeing here. Your expenses are the dotted red line, and you can see it stays behind the revenue up until fiscal year 30, and then in 31 it gets back down below. And this shows you the impact on the net revenue and your reserves. So each one of these years, you are building your reserves and you're maintaining those. Your revenue to expense ratio remains healthy up until fiscal year 30, when those debt service and capital expenditures are expected to increase. What this does is it gives a level impact to all revenue classes or rate categories, and it maintains or exceeds your target reserve balance. Your average residential customer with a 5/8" meter is going to see approximately an increase of about $11.50 per quarter. And that's using an average 1,600 cubic feet per quarter. Your option 2, what this is doing is focus more on the fixed revenue portion. This targets a 50% increase in the base charges next year. to get you closer to the 20%. And it also brings your base fees more in line with your surrounding communities of similar size. For this year, we would not impose an increase in usage during fiscal year in 2027, so it would only impact your base fees. What that does for your customers is it gives them a little bit more of an ability to anticipate what their bill is going to look like, because it's impacting the fixed revenue instead. It does include a modest increase to base charges and usage rates of 3% across the board in 28 and 29, and then 5% in 30 and 31. And what that's doing is that it's helping you address the fiscal year 30 capital expenses and setting the stage so that you're prepped for that in a more gradual manner. Your fixed revenue gets increased to 16%, and you maintain a net gain in each year except fiscal year 30. Gives you more insulation against factors that'll impact your volumetric revenue. And here you can see it's pretty healthy throughout up until, again, fiscal year 30. And then when we look at the overall impact to your reserves remain healthy. They're not hugely over what you would need, but it gives you the ability to have that additional so that if you did have that additional and you wanted to pay down debt early, you potentially could. Your worst year here from a revenue perspective would be fiscal year 30, but if you were able to take some of the reserves in the next 3 years, that would set you up so that in 2030 you wouldn't be in the red there.
Also, your first 3 years of projections are pretty reasonable. When you're hitting years 4 and 5, it's kind of it's like, what's the weather going to be like in 4 weeks? It's a little far out, but it's showing you a trajectory so that you're not just completely wondering, but this is not something that we would carve in stone for 5 years.
Yeah, and you can see these are the base rates that your consumers are paying. So for a 5/8 inch meter, your folks are paying $26.75. In comparison to Longmeadow, it's nearly $40, and Northampton is paying almost 3 times, at least twice what your consumers are paying. Even more so than your out-of-town users. So that's what your current would be. But then when you look at the larger meters, those folks that have a 3 and 4, 2, 3 and 4 inch, you're actually more in line with where they are. So if we were to use option 2, what your new base charges would be for your in-town would be $40 for a 5/8 inch meter. It's in pace with Longmeadow, but not as high as Northampton. But then your larger users actually end up getting closer to where Northampton's are. So that's a little bit out of balance. Your average residential would see an increase of about $13.38 per quarter. And you're still going to see, but your average larger meter user, which would be 2 inches and higher, would see a higher increase in their quarterly bills. And again, this looks really good from your reserve balance and the fixed revenue, but it doesn't equitably distribute everything across all of your users. So we have 2 additional alternate models that were requested, and the alternate one, I jumped ahead, is a variable rate increase. And what that does is it equitably distributes 5% net annual increase for all users while adopting a more aggressive shift toward a higher fixed revenue base with base rate increases. And then the other alternate option was a 15% increase in the small meter users. So everybody that has a meter 1 inch or less, with a 5% usage rate increase over existing usage rates for, well, what we did here is we introduced a tier structure. So that gives you, so that your higher users are paying more, but your lower users are not. So your smaller meter users are going to see a higher increase in their fixed fees, whereas your larger meter users would see the higher increase in their usage.
And that's for both of those options. One.
Yes, yes. So on the variable rate increase, we introduced that tier of, so tier 1 would be for everything that is usage of 1,500 cubic feet or less, and then tier 2 would be usage for everything over 1,500 cubic feet. And we basically, that second tier is just a 5% higher than the first tier. So if their usage is in line with what they currently are using, they're only going to see a small amount of an increase. It would be a 2% increase on the tier 1 for the smaller users, or the users that are under 1,500 cubic feet, and those that are using more would see a 5% increase. And then that would progressively increase over the next 5 years until we get to fiscal year 30 or 29, where then we would stabilize and keep it at 4% and 5% year over year. So the usage fee increase would be fiscal year to 26 to 31 would be overall a 18% and 28% accordingly. And then on the base fees, what we looked at was doing a 25% increase on the smaller meters, so 1 inches or less, and no increase on the base fee for the folks with the larger meters. And then we gradually stepped down the increase on the larger or the smaller users over the next 3 years, and then we stabilize that and maintain so that it gradually over, by fiscal year 31, you are more in line with all of your communities, and you're closer to a 20% increase or 20% fixed revenue. And so this is giving you an idea of what this is showing. You do have a slight dip in your net revenue in fiscal year 30, but that is not nearly as low as what the other two models were showing. And when we look at the net revenue and the year-end fund balance, it's enabling you to maintain a very healthy year-end fund balance every single year. And even though you do have a modest dip in your net revenue in 30, that can easily be negated with the additional reserves that you have in place. And what this does is it will increase your average residential customer with a 5/8 inch meter. If they're using an average of 1,600 cubic feet, they'll see an increase of approximately $7.05 per quarter. It's roughly 3.5%. The larger meters will still see a higher increase in their usage fees and a lower increase in their base fees over the next 5 years. Fixed base charges become more similar between the large and small meter users. And so what this is doing is that it's spreading the responsibility for the fixed revenue and total usage across all of your users. The final alternate option was a 15% base for small meters and a 5% increase in the Tier 2 usage. So we raised the Tier 2, we add that tier, and we increase that over Tier 1 by 5%. And then we increase all of the small meters annually at the same rate of 15%. And the large meters don't have an increase in their base usage, or their base rate, sorry. What that does for you is that actually puts it so that you have positive net revenue every single year. It's showing that you also would have keep a healthy, a healthy reserve fund balance year over year, which could enable you to either tackle some of the debt service and those complete, or at least fund capital projects sooner rather than later. Your average residential customer with the 5/8" meter is going to see an increase of about $3.35 or 1.4% per quarter in fiscal year 27. It's introducing that second high usage tier charged at a higher rate for consumption over 1,500 cubic feet. Your fixed base charges become more similar between large and small meter users as small meter base charges increase 15% over year. Your fixed revenue would increase to 17% of total revenue by 2031. It's still below the 20% target, but one of the things that we look at is there's a difference between total revenue, the revenue that we have historically, and reliable revenue. Reliable revenue would be the revenue that would be gained at your lowest usage point. You know, historically, what was the lowest over the last 5 years that we've had? So over time, we would be able to tweak that model so that we would be using your reliable revenue instead of your total revenue for the last couple of years. This does increase your reserves to over 50% of annual expenses, so that puts you in a much healthier spot and allows you to be in a position to tackle any debt and capital projects a little bit sooner. And this just kind of gives you a little bit of a summary of all of the options that were presented. So for option 1, 5% increase across the board. Your fixed revenue is 11%. Your large metered residential users shoulder the main responsibility for your fixed revenue. Your reserve target is met for fiscal year 27 through 31, and you maintain a positive net revenue 27 through 29 and fiscal year 31. Your average residential customer is going to see in 27 an increase in their bill by $11.58. In fiscal year 27, it would go up $12.28, and fiscal year 29, $12.68. Option 2 increases the base charges for all rate categories in fiscal year 27 by 50%. It increases your usage fees by 3% in fiscal year, or all fees, by 3% in 28 and 29, and 5% by 30 and 31. Your fixed revenue is going to increase to 16%. The fixed revenue burden is spread more equitably to small metered users, but your large metered users are still going to shoulder the responsibility because they're getting hit with that increase as well as the small metered users. Your reserve targets are met, and again, your positive net revenue. Your 5/8" residential customer is going to see an increase of $13.38 per quarter in next year in fiscal year 27. $8.17 in '28 and $8.46 in '29. So they would take a little bit of a hit next year to accommodate those fixed base fees, but they wouldn't be as impactful in the following 2 years. The next option, your alternate one, is a variable increase for both base rates and usage rates. Your base rates increase more for your small meters and the usage rates increase more for your large volume users. Your fixed revenue increases gradually to 15% by fiscal year 31. And the fixed revenue burden is spread more equitably to your small meter users. But your large volume consumers are shouldering the responsibility for your usage rates. Your reserve targets are met each year, and again, your positive net revenue every year except fiscal year 31 or fiscal year 30. Your average 5/8" residential customer bill will go up by $7 in '27. $8.17 in '28 and $10.49 in '29. And then the final option is a 15% increases in the base charges for small meters each year. So you're gradually getting to that 20% or closer to that 20%. You're going to see a 5% increase in usage. Charges for a newly introduced Tier 2 of usage over 1,500 cubic feet in fiscal year '27, followed by an annual 5% increase in usage charges for all users. And so what this is doing is giving you that 5% only on the Tier 2. Your fixed revenue goes up to 17% by fiscal year 31. Your burden, your fixed revenue burden is, again, spread more equitably to the small metered users, but your large volume consumers are still shouldering the higher responsibility for the usage rates. Reserve target is met each year, and you have a positive net revenue every year. Your average 5/8" residential customer bill goes up by $3.35 per quarter in fiscal year '27. It will go up to $11.79 in fiscal year '28 and $12.37 in fiscal year '29. So it's a smaller increase in their bill this year, but the remaining 2 years would be a little bit higher.
Can I ask a question really quickly?
Mm-hmm.
Is that cumulative?
No, that's an annual differential.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's the
got it.
annual differential.
Got it, okay.
So that's,
That's a wonderful presentation. Thank you for being so thorough. If we could go back just to the summary slide to have that up for
Certainly.
public comment and our discussion. At the conclusion of the presentation, I will open discussion to public hearing. If anyone would like to address the board with any thoughts on what's been presented tonight or anything else you would like the board to consider in our deliberations this evening. And if you do want to speak, just stand up, state your name,
Stand up.
or whatever works. I didn't mean to.
Standing is hard.
Yeah.
Kathy Wazinski, Overlook Drive.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions. I think if I'm reading the chart correctly, that option 1 increases by FY20, our bills will increase by about $35 in total.
Roughly, yeah, based on that math, yeah.
Okay, and that the other ones are mid-20s to 30s each year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, those are, like we just said, those are, year over year increases, so the.
Right, I just wanna,
Yep.
by FY 29,
Yes.
the increase, if we go with alt 6, is like $26 per quarter, if I did the math quickly.
Roughly, yes.
Okay, all right. In terms of projected expenses, I'm wondering what impact the planned increase in building in the town has on projected expenses and how those new buildings impact our expenses. Anybody?
Well, public speak, we don't particularly
In a
address.
public hearing, you're supposed to answer the questions.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
we don't,
okay,
so there's really no, per se, no impact on our expenses from that. We won't take on additional staff, we won't pump additional water, we won't take on the burden of installing any additional water main. Any building that gets put up, they pay a connection fee that covers the cost of their meter. I mean, the first development I'm thinking of is the condos going in on Pleasant Street, right?
Yep.
So they had to pay a subdivision connection fee for that to be built. We're still working with them on exactly how those buildings are gonna be individual, whether they're gonna be individually metered or metered as blocks, so. But any meters that go in there, the cost for those will be borne by the developer. So if you were to build a single-family home anywhere, if you could find a lot in Easthampton, they're getting pretty sparse these days, but you'd pay a water and sewer connection fee, I think it's $5,000 right now. And that
Yep.
covers the costs associated with your property tying to the city's utilities.
Right,
So-
but the increased flow must have some impact
No.
on
No,
the
like I said,
older
we won't
pipes?
take on, what's that?
The increased flow doesn't have a impact on the older pipes?
No. No, our utilities were constructed for all these mills to operate. Our water system can pump, I mean, we can pump 4 million gallons of water a day. We pump
I'm
2 on a
speaking
busy day.
specifically of sewer. So, so like Main Street, that capacity is already exceeding 100% of its capacity. And then we're adding.
I'd have to see the data you're basing that on. I don't know if you don't have flow data to make that statement, so I can't really.
We have pretty good data when we were
Do
looking
you
at
have it?
the Main
Is it something you
Street.
could send me to look at? I don't, because I've never seen it, and I was a utility supervisor for the city from 2016 to 2020, and I've been director since 2020, and I've never seen flow data to back that up.
Okay,
It's based on certain assumptions were made, but I have not seen flow data to back that up.
okay. All right, so on the rate category breakdowns chart, there's a few categories I don't understand. So no charge, there's 52 accounts where they don't pay anything.
It's public buildings.
Those are public buildings,
Yeah.
okay. All right, and then this out of town, I'm assuming is people that don't live in town but are hooked to
Yeah,
our
think of
system.
a home on Line Street that's in Southampton but takes Easthampton Water and Sewer Utility, Water and Sewer Services. They pay 1.5 times whatever an Easthampton resident pays,
Okay, and then this Southampton account,
which,
this says 1, that's all it says.
is that
oh,
our
that's the commercial,
interconnect?
the wholesale connection we have to sell water to Southampton.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other public input on what's been presented? Any suggestions, recommendations you like considered for deliberation? If not, I will move on and open discussion to the board.
I would like to note that we are only here to vote today on increases for 3 years.
Correct.
Not increases for 5, and 5 years out is what Rayburn has modeled for us. And there are proposed and then potential increases that follow those trends. But we're really only here to do 3
What is
years
in the
today.
summary?
Yeah.
27 to 29.
Yep.
Yeah, the
Yep.
other two are just for, to
Illustrative
let us know
purposes.
where we'll be at the end of this cycle and where we'll be
Absolutely.
starting at the next one.
Absolutely.
Yes. Always a good reminder. Any input, or I guess we'll also open this to Rayburn and DPW. Any reference or suggestions or other evaluations of the proposed options?
I would say from what we see in neighboring towns and other states, this is very thorough. I will say that all options that you guys have worked with us on they all have benefits. I don't think there's such thing as a perfect.
No.
And I think it was just brought up about 3 years, things change. You are looking at mild increases. The other thing that is very important to bring up, we do work with utilities that are dealing with a crisis that haven't raised rates in years, and their consumers are seeing astronomical. You guys are being proactive in any of these models to control that shock. So just again, because we're in so many utilities, this is proactive. And Emery, correct me if I'm wrong, but tier structures are very beneficial. The example I use is my mother, when she starts the hot water, she carries it in a pitcher to use for the bird feeder and the bird bath. The guy across the street washes his driveway for an hour. There's a difference in usage and payment of that, and that's kind of what a tier structure starts to pay a premium of, I'm just using a bunch of water because I want to. So that helps balance that usage.
Well, and I think that it's, what Easthampton has done with this study is you've looked at how do we get to where everybody is paying their fair share? And nobody's being negatively impacted unfairly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both alternate 1 and alternate 6 achieve that by having the smaller users and the larger users contributing fairly to the fixed revenue portion of the rates.
Mm-hmm.
But then those larger volume users are the ones that are shouldering the responsibility for taxing the infrastructure with the higher volume.
Correct. Yeah.
And so either one of those would achieve those goals
Mm-hmm.
and gain a much more positive outlook and for your customers, especially over the next 3 years. The least amount of impact on their bill is obviously alternate 6. Now that's for the average small meter user with 1,600 cubic feet. Somebody that's using more is going to have a little bit more of a different impact.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not going to be everybody across the board is only going to see $3.35 next year. But it enables them to kind of plan for that additional increase in fiscal year 28 and 29 and ease into it a little bit easier. But then again, alternate 1 spreads that out a little more equitably across the next 3 years. So even though you are seeing a small increase each year over year, it's pretty smooth, and so it's not going to impact them. It's a smoother increase, whereas in alternate 6, you have a significant jump from 27 to 28. So I guess the question back to you is, how do you want that to be received?
I think for the last 2 weeks, since we had our last meeting and we sort of floated these 2 models, I've literally gone back and forth between Alt 1 and 6, where, like you said, Alt 1 rolls it in. They both basically have the same net impact, give or take. But one rolls it in a little slower. One's, like you said, this year will be an introduction, and also we don't need the revenue as much in FY27.
Right.
And Alt 6, does increase. I think they both. I think by 29, Alt 1 gets to 14%, and Alt 6 gets to 15%, if I remember roughly. So it's like a 1% difference, but so Alt 6 gets us a little further along the way. But I think Alt 1 generates a little bit more revenue. I think we have slightly more retained earnings by that point. So it's like, where do we want to be? It's also it's also not the goal to extract as much as we need to, because all of them have a good retained earning ratio. So
Can I ask a question?
surely.
The 5% for the tier 2, where'd that come from?
That
Why not 10%, 15, 25%?
Well, basically, as you can tell, if there's Alt 1 and Alt 6, there was a lot of other alternates that we had Rayburn develop. We sort of took the model of, we saw what happened with no increase, that we had a deficit. And then they had their option 1 model, which was like a 5% flat, and that got us to where we needed to be. So we had a good idea that 5% was the target. And in Alt 1, we kind of split that between the 4 and 5% on the 2 tiers. And then Alts 2 through actually 7 go directly to your question, where we did a 3%, a 5%, and a 7%. And it proved out that the 3% didn't quite get us to where we needed to be. And the 7%, the retained earnings and excess cash were excessive to a point where we did not feel that that was a comfortable ask of the users. So, we kind of came to 5% from two different directions. It's enough to meet our goals, but without creating excess revenue.
And that, 5%, historically, inflation is roughly 5%. Some years it's a little bit more, some years a little bit less, but it's typically 4.5% to 5% year over year. So what that 5% does is enable you to keep pace with inflation for your expenses over the next 3 years.
Yeah, no, I get that part. I'm just wondering,
The extra
is there an
5%.
option to charge the big users a larger share than, the guy who's washing down his driveway for an hour? Maybe we
Typically,
charge him a little
There is
more.
You're
a
also dealing with
balance.
businesses, so if I own a laundromat, you're adding to my cost, which now I have to pass it on to the consumer. So that's the balance
Yeah.
we see, and sometimes that larger consumer is adding to the community, which has that value. So,
Well, and I think also early on, Easthampton has, I think it was like 88% residential. So it's a large ask for a very small part of the user base to disproportionately cover.
So are most of the large users the businesses as opposed to, this isn't the guy out hosing down his driveway?
Yeah, no, you'd have to
Spread
hose your
across.
driveway for
Yeah.
quite a while
So,
to equal a brewery or
yeah, I take it back. I don't
agriculture,
want
yeah.
my beer prices to go up.
Exactly. In Easthampton, that is
see, now you know
Well,
where we
and-
came from.
And there's also a little bit of a balance, because if you increase the rate on the higher users too much, they're not gonna use too much, and then you lose revenue.
they're gonna find a
So-
way to conserve.
Yes, so we wanna encourage responsible conservation, but we also wanna, this is a business to a degree, and you need to be able to
Yeah, it
cover
needs
your
to-
expenses.
No, that's good. I'm glad it was thought about.
Yeah,
Just
no,
wanted
it
to get
was-
a little feedback.
No, always good to hear a question.
There's one thing that I think is very important for the board and for questions is there's a fine balance of, we are extreme customer advocates, meaning your users. We want to make sure that it's fair and equitable. The other thing is too, is we have to maintain a higher fiscal reserve than most people think is okay because of the aging infrastructure.
Correct.
So there's this constant balance of what needs to be done. We work with a very well-known large city, not in Massachusetts. They are averaging 2.5 main breaks a week. And they have not replaced a single mile of pipe in 20 years, which means they are sitting on a time bomb of billions of dollars, staying ahead of that and doing all that. So that's that balance of affordable water, fiscal responsibility to feed Public Works to change a lot of pipe. And we don't sell pipe, so we don't make money on that. But we don't want your consumers to get hit with a 40% increase because we had to do something. So just some of the methodology. All of your choices are good. And I think we're good on our comments, so I'm sorry to.
Oh, no,
Join in.
I want
We're
to make sure we've.
You guys are done. Your alternate showed you guys are thinking more than most. So just so you guys know, you guys have done a good job.
Any input or preference for 1 or 6? We each of us, technically has a horse in the game, but like I said, I haven't been able to decide between the two over the last 2 weeks. I think they both get us where we need to be, slightly different ways. There has been some preference stated for minimizing impacts for next year's on users with Alt 6. The only thing that makes me leery of that is,
Then the next year,
it's larger.
Yeah.
It's not
that's a surprise.
it's not a credit if we're gonna ask for it later, so. But it does get us, in the 3 years, it gets us 1% closer to the fixed ratio. So, if we had more time, would we go back and find a hybrid between the two? But I don't think it would it's just splitting hairs and pennies at that point, so.
Well, if that's the main difference, would it come down to what's gonna result in fewer phone calls to the?
Well, I've been thinking about that, actually. It's kind of the communication piece, at a certain point. And what gets communicated and how.
I mean, there isn't really an outreach program once we do this. It's just gonna be, the billing rate,
You know what's funny, most of the,
It'll get recorded in our minutes for the next meeting and
yeah, most if not all of the complaints we've had over the recent rate increases were initially that the resident is upset because their bill went up.
Yeah.
What we generally are able to show them in their bill and their usage history is that it wasn't so much the rate increase that caused it was their usage, something wrong at their property, increased use of their irrigation system. And we almost, I'd say 90% of the time, that's the case, that it was actually their usage that went up for X, Y, or Z reason. And it wasn't so much our rates that led to that impact.
That makes sense. Their bill went up $100. They're saying, look, what kind of rate increase?
They immediately blame the city or go online and start on Facebook, and it just happened. It literally just happened this fall. A resident went online and was terrible about us on Facebook, and our utility supervisor met with him, I think 3 times, and went over, and sure enough, he showed him exactly what happened on his bill and the usage, and it was a problem with his irrigation system. That resident didn't go go back on and say, nope, it wasn't their rates, it was me,
Really?
Yeah.
Your rate increase, by the way, these are minimal.
yeah, no, I think I've addressed it in other meetings where, when we started this process, my gut feel/fear was it was gonna be an 8 to 10%, which is still probably reasonable compared to some, reading articles about what other municipalities have had to do. But the fact that we were able to tighten up the capital budget, tighten up the meter usage, tighten up billing, and are only looking at a sort of effective net 5% annual, I think we've done as best we can for the users.
If you break out $7.05, it's a quarter. Break that out into a day.
Yeah.
I mean, you are now talking.
Yeah, I mean, any ask is an ask, so.
Right, but I meant.
Well, it's a half hour of minimum wage.
Well,
Yes.
the reason I'm saying breaking out, we are
Over a
involved
year.
in a lot of
Or over a quarter.
Yep, yeah.
utilities outreach programs. So that would be what we would recommend
Yeah,
you
no, I
post on Facebook,
And-
not the mean, nasty stuff you
No,
would.
but like our last set of 3, I forget offhand, but they were all double digits, teens to 18% annual increases. So, that's what set us up for the, retained earnings we have now, but we don't need to keep that pace. So I think, this brings it back in. We were making up for deferred.
So that's a beautiful outreach, is we went from 18% down to this. That shows fiscal responsibility and whatnot.
And we're
So-
spreading it across the board so that there's no one portion of the community that's
Yeah.
going to be shouldering all of the
No,
responsibility.
I think that's
for
why
this.
we instantly gravitated towards the 2-tiered option, because that kind of gave us the, lack of a better term, levers to,
Yeah.
make that glide path of.
So the guy with 3 acres that's watering his lawn is gonna be paying more than the person that's got the postage stamp lawn.
Gotta make a choice. Or not. You can continue it, but I would like to get yeah, I mean, I know I've spoken a bit. I don't know if we each want to state a preference for 1 or 6, or, because I could be swayed at any point at this point, or.
If you guys don't mind to maybe help you, Emery, could you go back to the retained earnings piece of 1 and 6? Because what I want to show, which caught my eye, again, this is 5 years, so and I know this is tiny, so bear with me.
Yeah.
This is 110. Now, if you could go to the other alternate. It's 105. I'm gonna push for fiscal responsibility in the thing, so if you were looking for tomato, work on building your reserves, so if you are literally on the fence between the two, 105 shows a negative in 30, and option 6, for example, Anne-Marie, there is no red and you have a higher retained earnings. This builds a stronger fiscal responsibility for the utility, and we are talking peanuts. So if you guys were looking for a tomato, that's the only thing that really stands out. It's not a lot, so I'm not pushing it,
Yeah, no,
but I'm just saying,
I think, yeah, I understand, and I'm on the fence between, you know, both obviously keep the enterprise fund solvent and where it needs to be, and there's a slight preference for fiscal responsibility to the enterprise fund in one, and a slight for the users in the other, by saying, you know, we can float you 1 year, you know, like,
Yeah, and that's
but
not a
also,
significant.
both of those are beyond.
right, and I also wanted to
So-
call out, they're both so equal, that's why I was just,
Yeah.
if you're looking for something, that's the only reason I brought, not that I'm selling either one of them, but,
So in this one, we have a 14% for 29 and a 4.7 retained earnings. Can we see 6? Option 6. So this one, I get to 15 and it's 4.5. That makes sense to me. Oh, because you don't blow as much in 27. Alt 1 carries funds from 27 through. So yeah,
But we're not voting on FY 30.
no, 27, 28, and 29. So I was just trying to look at where we were to compare the two plans at the end of our rate setting.
So yeah, Alt 6 is gonna put you at, you know, roughly 4 in your year-end fund balance, which is well over,
Yeah, like you
target.
said, yeah, I think not a rule, but what we've tried to keep is in the 40 plus or minus % just because of the age of the system. And I think both
Yeah.
of these get us, actually
Both of those actually do,
get
yeah.
you to the high 40s.
So what this does here is in fiscal year 27, you know, you're going to be at 115%.
Yeah.
So 28 is 110, and then 29 is 109. So it's pretty
Yeah,
level
trails, yeah.
across the board with each year. But then when you get to Alt 6, we're looking at that, it actually kind of dips in
Yeah,
28 and 29. Whereas 27, because you've increased your,
with that larger base to start with,
yeah.
it compounds through the other two.
exactly.
All right, Gil, make a call.
Well, my main thought is, we're just doing the first 3 years. I won't worry about FY 30.
Nope.
That puts Alt 1 up there for me, so.
Huh?
I mean, the tiered usage does add a level of complexity for folks to understand.
Mhm.
And it
But I mean,
doesn't
both of,
go ahead.
but both of them, we're gonna be rolling that out.
Yeah.
I don't see a, you know, one or two, option 1 or 2. in the debate. I'm sorry to interrupt you, what was your?
No, I mean, just in the interest of keeping things as simple as possible.
Yeah, Alt 6 has a level, you're not introducing the slide,
The tier.
well, they both have tiers, but Alt 6 applies it evenly. Where Alt 1, you know, 2% this year, 3% this year, 4, you know, that's
Yeah.
a part, that's more to explain. I mean, I know we're just gonna set the fiscal numbers and not how we,
do you mean breaking up the consumption into
Yeah.
tiers? Yeah. So option 6 has, you are now not just seeing a flat rate that has increases. It's now, if you go over 1,600, you're paying a different rate.
Yes.
So that doesn't happen in alternate 1.
Yeah, it does.
1, I'm sorry, I was thinking the,
option.
I thought you were
Option 1,
Yes.
yeah.
option 1.
Alternate 1, it
They're both
adds-
doing tiers.
Yeah,
They're both doing tiers, you know,
Okay.
one is implementation.
This is easy.
it's just steps through it gradually for the smaller users,
so-
and it maintains it for those higher users.
And the other not redeeming, but the other thing to consider is this one after the first year of base fees, the larger meters do see the 5%, where option 6 gives them the reprieve of having high historic rates instead of compounding them.
Yep.
Given that, I would lean towards 6, just from simplicity of explanation. Doesn't extract as high a retained earnings and gets us 1 point closer to fixed ratio.
I like 6 for the people of the future,
Yeah.
and 1 for the people of right now who are also us.
Yeah, the only negative I have for 6 is that years 2 and 3 have a higher, the net, I think they both get us roughly $26.
Yeah, the net
Increase.
is about the same,
It's
but
just whether it's $3.11 and 12 or 7, 8, and 10.
Yeah.
But if that was the only negative, I think I would go with 6.
well, and if you look at the difference, that's $16 a year impact.
Yeah.
Alright, I think I am also for 6.
Can we sway you?
Sure, oh yeah.
All right. To end 6 months of discussion, I will make a proposal to adopt the rates outlined in alternative 1.
I second motion.
All right,
You said 1.
Alt 6.
We
Okay,
should
so,
probably say that again.
Let's restate.
yes,
I make a proposal, I make a motion to adopt the rates and fees outlined in alternative 6.
I second the motion.
All right.
so Alt 6, make sure.
For clarification, I prepared a summary table with the rates and fees for all the meter sizes and the sewer and water regulation sections and subsections that they impact, just so we didn't have to extract them from the presentation. All right, roll call for that?
Yep, Thomas Mulsberry,
Yes.
Leah Strode,
Yes.
Gil Holwyn,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries, Alt 6.
Alright.
6 months of deliberation, that's a celebration tonight.
We get takeout.
Alright, there you go.
All right. With that, if there's no further comment or discussion, I will make a motion to adjourn this public hearing.
I second.
Thomas Mulsberry,
Yes.
Leah Strode,
Yes.
Gil Hogan,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.